Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something, well, truly perspective shifting. It's this idea that you, the person listening right now, you're not just you, not just an individual.
Right, but also maybe the universe becoming aware of itself.
Exactly, or maybe a spark of something divine taking human form.
And even a player in what could be seen as a kind of cosmic game.
It can sound like a lot to take in, can't it?
Oh, absolutely, especially when, daily life feels so real, so full of very genuine challenges.
Yeah.
But this concept, it's been explored across different schools of thought for ages, and it offers a really compelling way to look at who we are and our place in everything.
It really does. So our mission in this deep dive is to explore this whole multifaceted idea.
Okay.
We'll be drawing on insights from, well, the ever-thought-provoking Alan Watts.
Always interesting.
The deep wisdom you find in Buddhism and Hinduism, and also those recurring themes that pop up in mystical experiences.
So we've got philosophical ideas, religious principles, personal accounts.
That's right. We've gathered a bit of everything. Okay, so let's start unpacking this first big idea. You as the universe becoming conscious.
Yeah, and what's really insightful is how Alan Watts talked about this. He really tried to cut through that feeling we have of being a completely separate individual.
The separate ego.
Exactly. He has suggested that's actually more of an illusion our minds create. He used that great analogy.
Yeah.
You know, the one about the ocean making waves?
Oh, yeah. Each wave looks distinct, rises, falls.
But it's fundamentally just water, isn't it? An expression of the whole ocean.
Right. He saw us as the universe peopling, I think was his phrase.
Peopling, yeah. So instead of thinking of ourselves as these like isolated bubbles, we're more like unique expressions. Temporary, maybe, but vital ways the entire cosmos experiences itself.
And he really hammered home the now in all this, didn't he?
Oh, definitely. If you are the universe becoming conscious, that awakening, that awareness, it's happening right now, in this very moment.
Not something to wait for.
Precisely. That constant, drive for some future point or worrying about what's coming next,
Yeah.
that can really keep us from seeing the richness of what's happening right here. If our focus is always somewhere else, we just miss it. We miss the universe's conscious unfolding happening within us, all around us now.
And that wave analogy really lands that point about being temporary yet essential.
It does. Each wave is unique. It has its own little journey, but it's undeniably part of the whole ocean. The key insight, really, is that feeling separate. It's kind of a trick our minds play.
We're all fundamentally connected.
Like different expressions of the same underlying reality.
Yeah. It really makes you reconsider your place in everything. And, this idea of a conscious universe, it's not just some modern New Age thought, is it? It has some serious philosophical roots.
Oh, absolutely. You could look back at panpsychism, for instance. It's actually a pretty old idea, but it's seeing a real resurgence in philosophy right now.
Panpsychism. Remind me.
It suggests that consciousness, or at least something sort of mind-like, isn't just something that magically pops up when you get complex brains like ours.
Okay.
But it's maybe a basic fundamental feature of reality itself, existing even down at the level of, say, fundamental particles.
Wow. Like tiny bits of awareness everywhere.
Sort of. Think of it like maybe individual pixels on a screen creating the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Panpsychism suggests even the smallest pixels of reality might have some basic form of proto-awareness that builds up into our consciousness.
And that helps with the hard problem, how consciousness comes from just stuff.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It challenges that idea that consciousness just abruptly emerges out of nowhere from non-conscious matter.
So instead of it suddenly appearing, it's more like it's been there in some form all along. That's a big shift.
It is. And then there's cosmopsychism, which is related but slightly different. It takes it a step further, really. It proposes that the entire cosmos is actually a single conscious entity.
The whole universe is conscious.
Yeah. And our individual minds, yours and mine, are just parts of this larger cosmic consciousness, like we're individual cells, maybe, within a giant conscious organism.
Okay, so panpsychism is consciousness at the micro level. Cosmopsychism is the whole universe as one consciousness. What are the tricky parts, the big questions?
Well, sure. With panpsychism, you get the combination problem. It's like, how do all these tiny bits of proto-consciousness combine to create our complex, unified experience? It's not obvious.
Right. How do the pixels make the movie feel real?
Kind of, yeah. And with cosmopsychism, there's the derivation problem. If there's one big cosmic subject, how do we arise from that as seemingly separate individuals? How do you get the parts from the whole?
So still plenty to wrestle with philosophically.
Definitely. These are major puzzles.
But it's fascinating how these deep philosophical ideas seem to, well, they echo what mystics have been talking about for centuries, just in different language.
Precisely. You look across different cultures throughout history, and you find mystics describing these incredibly powerful experiences of universal oneness.
Where this sense of self just dissolves.
Exactly. The feeling of their individual self seems to fade away or expand, and they experience this profound connection to everything. This cosmic consciousness, that phrase comes up again and again in their accounts.
It's striking how these philosophical ideas about consciousness being fundamental or the cosmos being one mind seem to align with what mystics describe from direct experience.
It really is. It's like these very personal, subjective experiences are pointing towards the same kind of reality the philosophers are trying to map out, suggesting maybe the divisions we normally perceive between ourselves, between us and the world, aren't as solid, as real as they feel day to day.
That feeling of interconnectedness going beyond the ego.
It's key to mystical experience. It adds this personal experiential layer to the more abstract, philosophical, or spiritual ideas of a fundamentally connected universe.
Okay, so that connects the philosophical and the experiential. Now, let's shift gears slightly to another facet of this. The idea that every person is a child of God made flesh.
Right, so we've seen how philosophy and mystical states hint at this larger consciousness. Now let's dig into how specific religious traditions like Hinduism frame our individual connection to something divine.
Okay, this takes us into a more explicitly spiritual territory. Let's start with Hinduism. How does it explain this idea of, inherent divinity?
Hinduism offers a really rich perspective here, particularly through the concepts of Atman and Brahman.
Atman and Brahman, okay.
So Atman is generally understood as the individual soul, the inner self, your essential being. And Brahman is the ultimate reality, the sort of cosmic consciousness, the ground of all being.
Got it.
And a central teaching in many, though not all, Hindu traditions is that your Atman, your individual soul, is fundamentally connected to Brahman. In some schools, like Advaita Vedanta, they're considered ultimately one and the same, not just connected, but identical at the deepest level.
Wow. So it's like if Atman is your individual breath, Brahman is like the entire atmosphere. Distinct, maybe, but totally inseparable.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
So this divine spark people talk about, that's essentially the Atman. It's seen as a part of that ultimate divine reality dwelling within each of us.
So every person carries a piece of the divine within them.
Exactly. Making them, in that sense, a child of God, an expression, a manifestation of this ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Now, different schools within Hinduism might nuance this relationship slightly.
Sure.
Like Vaishnavism might emphasize a more personal relationship with the divine. But that core idea of inherent divinity, of Atman's connection to Brahman, is really strong.
Okay. And what about Buddhism? Buddhism doesn't have quite the same concept of a personal creator God, right?
Yes.
So how does this idea of inherent potential or divinity play out there?
That's a really important distinction, yeah. Buddhism generally doesn't focus on a creator God in the same way.
Yeah.
But it offers this incredibly profound concept of Buddha nature.
Buddha nature.
Yeah. This is the inherent potential for enlightenment, for awakening to the ultimate truth of reality that exists within all sentient beings, not just humans.
So it's an innate capacity.
Exactly. An intrinsic capacity to develop what you might call divine-like qualities, wisdom, compassion, liberation from suffering.
So even if they don't use the specific language of child of God, the underlying idea is still there. That we all possess this incredible potential for something beyond our ordinary, limited experience.
Precisely. And the Buddhist concept of anatman, or no self, actually supports this in a way.
How so?
By highlighting the interconnectedness and impermanence of our existence. We aren't these fixed, isolated, independent selves. We're more like these dynamically interconnected parts of a larger whole, constantly changing.
So less focus on a separate divine spark and more on the potential that arises from understanding our interconnectedness and lack of a fixed self.
You could put it that way. While the vocabulary and the framework are different from Hinduism, that underlying idea of an inherent potential for higher consciousness, for realizing something beyond our conditioned limitations, definitely resonates with the concept of inherent divinity or divine spark.
It's fascinating how these different traditions, with really unique ways of seeing the world, seem to arrive at similar core ideas about our ultimate potential.
It really is. And then you have the mystical traditions across various religions, which often seem to bridge these conceptual gaps in their own experiential way.
How do they fit in here?
Well, mysticism, broadly speaking, often emphasizes this concept of divine immanence.
Immanence, meaning?
Meaning the divine isn't just something separate and transcendent out there, but is actually present within the world, within creation, and crucially, within each of us.
Ah, okay. God within, not just God above.
Exactly. This belief in an indwelling spirit or divine presence right here inside every person strongly reinforces this idea of being inherently, intimately connected to the divine. It brings the sacred right down to the individual level.
Yeah, it makes it very personal, doesn't it? The divine isn't just some distant concept, but something tied to our very being.